Even after covering the costs for my sister's wedding, I found myself not on the guest list. She coldly mentioned that I didn't fit the desired vibe. Reality hit her hard when everything at the venue was canceled at the last minute. The moment I learned about this exclusion, it wasn't through a heartfelt discussion or a mishap in the mail. I, much like discovering a secret party, stumbled upon a social media post that clued me in. I recall vividly an elegant invitation, with gold embossed lettering placed gracefully atop satin fabric. It read, "Can't wait to celebrate with everyone I love on the most special day of my life." It mentioned loved ones, yet I was missing. Initially, I assumed an error. Maybe my invitation was misplaced, or she'd let me know in person later after all I'd invested 6 months ensuring her dream wedding. I paid for the venue deposit when she and her fiancé were short on funds, handled the catering advance when my parents hesitated, and even gave her dress money, all while never seeing it. As I scrolled through the post's comments, my stomach turned. Friends, relatives, colleagues, they all gushed about attending the big event. One cheeky remark was about the exclusivity of the guest list, which struck me then. I was purposely left out. I sent her a soft query via text, asking if my invite was lost. The answer delayed until nightfall. At 10:34 p.m., a text arrived. "Sister. Hey, I wanted to explain. We made hard decisions about the guest list. It's a curated event, and you just don't fit the vibe. I know you're happy for me from afar. Love you." The message was a cold blow. I finally grasped I was intentionally excluded. It wasn't because I hadn't succeeded. I did. I owned a successful auto repair shop specializing in luxury cars, earning well. Perhaps it mattered not because I wasn't in an office wearing a crisp suit. Instead, I was a respected mechanic. Yet my sister saw me differently, as her behavior often implied. Once, her dismissive remarks about my profession stung. "Oh, my brother just runs some car shop." And despite my wholehearted financial support for her wedding, she curated me out of it. Our family dynamics hadn't changed. The signs were present long before, small jabs at dinners or sly remarks about my business compared to her marketing firm feats. Despite these slights, I remained supportive. I didn't stop when they needed help. I funded the venue, catering, and her attire without ever asking for a dime back. It was always about her dreams, making me feel sidelined over time. Recognizing the exclusion wasn't surprising, but it was heartbreaking nonetheless. I joked that if you want something nice, you have to pay for it. My sister brushed it off, pointing out how easy it was for me to say since I didn't have student loans or the pressure of maintaining a professional look. To her, my same boots every day symbolized my lack of success, which she equated with appearances. She never acknowledged how I built my business from scratch, working 60-hour weeks to ensure job stability for my employees. To her, I was only the guy with oil-stained hands and working-class dilemmas. Still, I supported her financially when she and her fiancé found themselves short. I transferred the money instantly without seeking acknowledgement, assuring myself it was all for family. Yet, I found myself excluded from her wedding, not deemed worthy of an invite. I spent that sleepless night reflecting, trying to pinpoint when I became an embarrassment. Was it when I attended a family gathering directly from work, still in overalls? Or when she introduced me to her prestigious friends, reducing my profession to mere car work? The next day, I went to my parents' house unannounced to hear their unfiltered conversations. My mother's voice emerged from the kitchen, filled with the familiar undercurrent of disappointment. "You know how he is," she said. My sister chimed in. "I just don't want him embarrassing me. It's a sophisticated event. I can't have him looking like he crawled out from under a car." My dad murmured, "He's family," but his words lacked strength. My sister retorted, "Exactly, but he needs to understand it's not about him. I don't want him making guests uncomfortable." Hearing enough, I entered the kitchen, and the room fell silent as my sister turned pale. "Is this how you see me?" I asked, maintaining my composure. She stammered but insisted. "Don't take it personally. It's just not your kind of crowd." I inquired, "My kind of crowd?" She sighed. "Everyone there is from the corporate world, lawyers, executives, people who actually network." You don't share anything with them. Because I don't push paper in an office. I must be too dumb for conversation, I replied. She quickly denied it, but her face betrayed her true thoughts. My mother quietly added, "Sweetheart, it's just a different kind of event. You do come across a bit rough sometimes, always in work clothes, and you don't, well, carry yourself like her guests do." I own a business, I maintained, and I earn more than half of those sophisticated guests. But since I don't don a suit daily, I'm deemed unfit. My sister sighed. It's not about money. It's about image. You've helped so much with the wedding, and I appreciate it, but this is my day. I want it to be perfect, and I don't think you'd fit in. The truth struck. Despite covering her bills and helping her out numerous times, to my family, I'd always be the grimy mechanic. I nodded, absorbing the blow. Understood. Don't be like that, my mother interjected. We'll have a nice family dinner after the honeymoon, just us. That'll be more your style. I smiled, void of warmth. Exactly. In my world, when someone helps you, you don't repay them with disrespect. I walked out as they remained silent. Driving back to my shop, my phone buzzed with a message from my sister. Please, don't overreact. I love you. Can you still assist with the final cake payment due Friday? XO. I laughed hard, pulled over. She genuinely believed I'd continue aiding her after all this. She thought for years, I had been the family's safety net, always there in tough times, the one they turned to without hesitation, saying yes no matter the cost to myself. I had believed it was my duty, as families should help each other out. But this time, things had changed. My sister didn't just take my money. She did so, while looking down on me. Each check, every transfer, she accepted without a second thought. Yet, when it was time to acknowledge me in public, in front of her sophisticated friends, I was suddenly deemed unworthy. Despite that, she had the audacity to message me about her wedding cake costs, as if nothing was wrong. This time was different. I wouldn't swallow my pride. By the time I arrived at my shop, I had already made my decision. I replied to her text with a clear message. Sorry, I wouldn't want to embarrass you by associating with your wedding. I'm sure you'll manage without me. Good luck. No emojis, no fake smiles, just a direct note. Within 5 minutes, she was calling, but I let it go to voicemail. She tried again, then my parents followed suit. By the end of the night, I had 12 missed calls. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of desperate texts. My sister. What do you mean you're not paying for the cake? It's already ordered. You can't pull out now. We're depending on you. My mom chimed in. Sweetheart, don't be spiteful. Let's talk this out. Dad said, we didn't raise you this way. I shook my head, staring at the screen. No apologies, just assumptions that I'd keep playing my role. I called my sister, and she answered immediately. Oh my God, finally. Listen, I don't know why you're acting out, but you're being irrational. You agreed to pay already. So, I changed my mind, I replied, cutting her off. Silence. I repeated, letting her absorb it. I'm not paying another cent, figure it out yourself. Are you serious? She shrieked. You're really going to betray me like this? I laughed. Betray? Like when you conveniently forgot to invite me because I don't fit your wedding's vibe, or how you and Mom talked about me like some sort of embarrassment. You mean that kind of betrayal? She scoffed. It's not the same. That's about appearances, not money. This is actual responsibility. Well, that's not my concern, I said calmly. You didn't want me at your wedding, fine. But you can't take my money while pretending I'm invisible. You made it clear I don't belong, so I'm respecting that. Oh, stop being dramatic, she snapped. You're just mad because you weren't invited. Grow up. I exhaled slowly, maintaining my resolve. It's not about the invite, surprisingly, I said. It's about you treating me like an ATM, soaking up what I provide while looking down on me. You have plenty of money, you wouldn't even notice, she scoffed. And there it was, not gratitude or entitlement but pure greed. You're right, I said, my tone frostier than ever. I have enough money, and none of it will go to you anymore. Wait, she began, but I hung up on her. For the rest of the week, I heard nothing from her, but my parents were relentless by the weekend. My mom whined that my sister was under too much stress. Can't you just do this one thing? My dad added, it's already planned. What's a few $1,000 to you? Family helps family, my mom repeated, as if that meant something. I had reached my limit. Family helps family? Funny, I don't recall any of you helping when I was starting my business or working endless hours to support myself, or when I paid for half of her wedding and was still treated poorly. Silence. You guys can figure it out, I finalized. I'm done. I ended the call and blocked their numbers, leaving them to deal with it themselves. Silence, for once, wasn't something I expected, from my sister or from my parents. For years, my family treated me as their personal ATM, so I expected calls full of pleas or even thinly veiled threats, things like, you'll regret this, or, you're being selfish. Yet, my phone was silent for 2 whole days. It was clear they weren't ignoring me out of anger. They were frantic, trying to figure out how to replace the money I had just withdrawn from them. It dawned on me they were busy undoing the damage of their assumption that I would always be there to bankroll them regardless of how they treated me. Then, on the 3rd day, my mother appeared at my shop without any warning. She walked in as if she owned the place, her eyes shifting around at the cars being worked on and my employees moving efficiently from one task to the next. I wiped the grease off my hands with a rag and crossed my arms. Something wrong? I asked. We need to talk, she said tightly. I directed her to the office. By all means, I replied. She sat in the chair across from my desk, folding her hands in her lap, looking awkward and out of place like she'd rather be anywhere else. I took my time sitting down, letting her stew in her discomfort. She's in trouble, my mother said finally, referring to my sister. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, don't act like you don't know, she added. I don't, I replied, leaning back, but I'm sure you're about to tell me. She let out a sharp breath, as if she was the one entitled to frustration. The bakery won't release the wedding cake without the remaining payment. The venue is threatening to cancel unless the balance is settled, and she still hasn't paid off the florist. The wedding is in 2 weeks, and she can't manage all this on her own, my mother pressed. That's unfortunate, I said. She blinked at me, incredulous that I wasn't rushing to fix it. You have the money, she insinuated carefully, as though speaking to a child. You could help her and it wouldn't even affect you. I smiled slowly and said, and yet here we are. Her nostrils flared. Stop being petty, she scolded. You agreed to pay, and she planned everything around that agreement. You can't just back out last minute. I tilted my head. You mean like how she planned her guest list without me? Funny how that works. This isn't the same thing, my mother argued. Sure it is, I responded. She made a choice, I made mine. She wanted a wedding without me, so she doesn't need my money either. Oh, for God's sake, my mother muttered, rubbing her temples. I waited for her to deploy guilt tactics, expecting a reminder that family helps family and that grudges shouldn't be held. Instead, she straightened, inhaled, and said, if you don't help, she'll have to downgrade everything. She'll be humiliated. People will talk. I laughed. Now we're getting to the real issue. Her face hardened. It's not just about appearances, she insisted stiffly. She deserves a beautiful wedding. She deserves what she can afford, I corrected, and clearly, it's not the wedding she envisioned. Her lips thinned. So that's it? You're going to let your sister suffer? She's not suffering, I stated flatly. What she's getting is a much-needed reality check. My mother studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable, then stood, smoothed her blouse, and adjusted her purse strap. You'll regret this, she stated simply. I shrugged. Maybe. She left without another word, leaving me with nothing but relief. Over the following days, my sister's perfect wedding plans began to unravel. She posted a vague status on Facebook. It's hard when people you count on let you down, but I guess that's life, right? I ignored it. A mutual cousin later called. Dude, what's going on? Your sister's freaking out. She said you bailed on paying for the wedding. That's right, I confirmed. But why? The cousin asked. Because she didn't invite me, I replied simply. Silence ensued, then, oh, yeah, okay, I get that. The next day, my sister texted, "Sister, can we talk?" I waited an hour before replying. Me, talk about what? Sister, I don't want things to be like this between us.
Can we meet for coffee?
I nearly laughed at the irony. This was the same sister who had intentionally excluded me from her life's most significant day because I didn't meet her expectations. She didn't want the situation to be like this because it was awkward for her image. However, I was intrigued and agreed to meet her at the coffee shop. When I arrived, she was already there, drumming her manicured fingers on her cup. She gave a hesitant smile. "Hey," I said, taking a seat. She sighed dramatically. "I know you're upset," she started. "I'm not upset," I interjected. "I just finally see things for what they are." "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked with a frown. "It means I understand now. I'm useful when you need something, but the minute I become inconvenient to your little perfect world, you discard me," I explained. "That's not fair," she protested. "Isn't it?" I leaned back. "You didn't think I was good enough to be at your wedding, yet my financial help was acceptable? You can't have it both ways." She pressed her lips together. "I just wanted everything to be perfect. I thought you'd care." "Well, now you know," I replied. She hesitated. "If I invite you now, will you help?" I smiled, standing up. "Enjoy your wedding, sis," I said, walking out, "but you'll have to manage without me." On the morning of my sister's wedding, I felt surprisingly light, unburdened by stress, guilt, or obligations. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by their expectations. I didn't have to rush around fixing last-minute issues. No calls were asking me to cover extra costs or to be the savior of the day. I wasn't invited, probably, because I had stopped caring. However, my family seemed to still care about my money. At 11:27 a.m., my phone rang with a call from Mom. I let it ring. At 11:42 a.m., Dad tried. I ignored it. By 12:03 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from a cousin. "Bro, you're not going to believe this. The venue kicked them out." I stared at the screen and laughed. This was the disaster I had cautioned them about. I offered plenty of opportunities to correct their course, but my sister believed someone would swoop in to save the day, yet no one did. Without the final payment, the venue staff literally locked the doors while guests arrived in confusion, clad in suits and cocktail dresses, as the wedding planner scrambled for explanation. My sister was hysterical. The grand 5-tier cake wasn't delivered, the upscale floral arrangements were canceled, and the high-profile wedding she bragged about for months was gone. By 1:15 p.m., she eventually called. "What?" I answered, my tone flat. "Are you happy now?" she screamed. I reclined in my chair. "Am I amused about what?" "About ruining the wedding," she snapped. "Oh," I said, unfazed. "Didn't have enough money?" "You knew we didn't have enough. You promised to help," she cried. I chuckled. "No, you assumed." Silence. "You let me fail," she said, her voice trembling.
No, y correcta.
"You failed on your own." Finally, her composure broke. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why couldn't you just help? After everything we've been through? After everything I've done?" "Everything you've done?" I snapped. "Like using me for years? Like taking my money without hesitation? Like treating me like trash when I was no longer useful?" "I didn't mean it like that," she murmured. "You never do," I replied icily. "That's the problem." A heavy silence stretched between us. Her voice finally wavered. "So this is it? You're really walking away?" "I already did," I said. "You just didn't notice until now." I hung up. In the end, they moved the wedding to a relative's backyard last minute. No fancy decorations, no high-end catering, just a makeshift setup with whatever they could scrounge. My sister reportedly spent the night choking back tears, too mortified to enjoy her own wedding. I didn't reach out, apologize, or check in. I let them manage on their own for once. For the first time, I felt free. A year later, it took months before my parents accepted I wasn't changing my mind. They tried guilt, then anger, then silence. Now they treat me cautiously, aware that pushing too hard might result in me walking away for good. As for my sister, She never apologized, but she also never asked for money again. I count that as a victory. Meanwhile, I'm still running my business, still thriving. Only now, every dollar earned is rightfully mine.